Hi everyone, it's MJ and welcome to the second semi-final of the Actuarial Society of South Africa's chess tournament, brought to us by Insight. We've got two players, both of them coming from the University of Wits, which is where I'm from, and playing with the black pieces is Shivar, and with the white pieces is Kenyon. And yeah, let's just jump straight into this match and see how it goes. So the game begins with pawn to e4, and I really like this opening from white because it's going to lead to an aggressive game because both the queen and the bishop are now released and they can enter. Conversely, if the d pawn had been pushed up, then you're kind of like keeping your queen a little bit trapped in, and it's going to lead to a more defensive game. So really cool to see white being aggressive and saying, you know what, this might be the semi-final of the actuarial tournament, but hey, I'm not going to be shy. Black replies with pawn to c6. And I like this. This is in fact what I tend to play. It's known as the Caro-Kann defense. And I like it because it's a very strong opening from black that is a little bit unfamiliar to chess players, in the mid rankings. Of course, both of our players have got very good rankings, very good players to have gotten to the stage of the tournament. So I don't think white is going to be too surprised by this type of opening. And so, of course, moves up to d4. And this is, again, white just saying, hey, I'm ready to play, I'm coming in, and I'm going to be very, very aggressive. Now, black does something strange. They move the pawn to e6, and you can see the AI is going to give this a little yellow question mark. That means it's an inaccuracy because the typical book move would have been to push the pawn from d7 all the way up to d5, kind of challenging a little bit for that center. So it's a little bit strange, but it's not a mistake. And what we're going to see is because of this inaccuracy, white's advantage is now going to be pushed up to 0.78. Let's see how white replies. White replies with bringing out the knight to f3, and this is the best move for white. It's what the AI wants to do. And again, what you're doing is you're just getting your pieces into the action, targeting the center, and if black's going to leave it alone, you might as well capitalize on it. Black does reply with d5, which it's kind of like the Caro-Kann, but a little bit out of sequence, so a little bit unorthodox. But essentially, this pawn is coming in, it's striking the center, and it's saying, hey, I'm ready for a fight. Now, does white take the black pawn? White does, even though the AI is saying, that maybe wasn't the best thing to do. The AI would have preferred, as you can see, the knight on b1 to jump all the way to c3. It would have just developed another piece while maintaining that pawn structure. What happens is we're seeing black capturing, but it's capturing with the c pawn, whereas the AI would have preferred capturing with the e pawn. I guess black wants to keep that structure strong in front of their king to prevent the queen coming out and checking. But again, that does allow for the bishop now to come and cause a little bit of problems. In fact, the bishop comes out and the AI is like, yeah, it's an excellent move. The better move would have been to push the pawn up to a3. And of course, the whole point of doing that is to prevent the black bishop from coming down and causing check. My recommendation of getting maybe the bishop to come up and call check over there, as you can see, wasn't even thought of by either the AI or by white. But even black, for their move, again, the AI just wants to bring the bishop into the middle of the board. And I guess it just expands, those diagonals, because at the moment, the beginning of the chess game, bishops really only have one diagonal. Bringing them into the center of the board opens them up and allows them to attack on both sides, which can be very advantageous, later down in the game. But instead, we're seeing the black knight being activated. And this is a good move. We got the green tech, you're developing, you're getting it off a starting square, but of course, getting that black bishop into d6 would have been a much stronger position. And what we can see is black is kind of clawing back the game a little bit. The advantage is only 0.67, so it's still being held in the balance. Now we're seeing the white coming in, supporting it. It also is going to allow, the queen to come out, the AI is saying, well, there's also an opportunity to castle and just really secure your king's defensive position. We do see an inaccuracy coming in from black. This is their second one now, and we're only a few moves into the game. And I guess black is ignoring the opportunity to develop another piece, get it out there, and attack the center. The idea behind coming to pawn to h6 is again to prevent the bishop, white's bishop on the black square, to coming to g5, and pinning that knight. So maybe black has got some plans for this knight and they want to defend that position. And, we kind of see black was thinking about moving the bishop, but brings it up to the f4 position. Now, I like that. That's quite a cool move. Bringing the knight to the center is what the AI would have suggested. That's a little bit aggressive for me. It would have been in flavor with how white's been playing the game, but of course white doesn't make that move just yet. We are going to see black coming out and bringing the queen. Again, the AI would have preferred for the knight to come out and join the fun. But, bringing the queen out, yes, you do put a bit of a threat onto the b2 square, but come on, white should be able to see that. And they do. Of course, it is an accurate move because there is a better way to defend the pawn. Getting it in front of the king at e2 would have allowed for that defense, keeping a bit of pressure on the king because it's kind of in the file. Because what's happening now, if I was black, I would have captured the queen. Why? Just to purely upset the pawn structure. Yes, okay, you might release the rook, but you're upsetting that pawn structure and that can pay dividends down the line. So really surprising to see that black doesn't do it. Of course, the AI doesn't recommend the taking of it either. They would have preferred for the bishop to come out. Now, if I was white, I would take the black queen, and you can see it is an interesting one. People like, Michael, your theory about disrupting the pawn structure doesn't matter because people are doing different things. In fact, the knight is coming to d2, and that's exactly what the AI likes, because now if either of these queens are captured, then knights can come in and, take them back without upsetting the pawn structure. We then see black play the knight to h5, which is an interesting move. Chess theory kind of says, hey, don't have your knights on the edges because it just limits their movement. But look, you are threatening to win a bishop, and if white is sleeping, and remember, this is a timed match as well, so there's a lot of time pressure, and you can sometimes get a few good moves. Also, where exactly is white going to now move this bishop of theirs? However, the better move would have been to put pressure on it by putting the pawn to g5. But AI and black both having the same idea that, hey, it's time to kick the bishop. We do see that the bishop comes back, and again, this is an inaccurate move, not the right idea, because, well, one, you're allowing the bishop to still be captured by the knight, and ideally, once the knight has gone onto that h file, keep it there. It's not in a very good position. And when you're in like a semi-final like this, where you're not going to get cheap pieces, you're not going to get cheap takeouts, it's worth winning the game on the positional play. And I kind of feel, white might potentially lose that bishop and have their pawn structure disturbed. Better move would have been to take the queen, although with their knight out there, they're not really going to disrupt too much. And there we go. We see black and me are thinking in tune now, because they do capture it. And of course, white has to reply by taking it, and it just upsets that pawn structure. We then see black making the best move, activating their bishop, and now putting, some more pressure on this pawn that has now been stacked up, and that might play up later on in the game. White then decides, let's get aggressive. You want to eat my pieces, I'm going to eat your pieces. The war has officially begun. Even though the AI was like, hey, maybe just bring the queen to c2, it would have been quite a nice linkage with the bishop. They could have come in and put some check pressure, or prevented at least the king from castling, because then there's some checking and just a little bit of disturbance. But white's saying, you know what, we need some revenge after we've lost our bishop. So the take has been made, and then all the theory that I was saying about don't disrupt the pawn, the AI totally ignores, because the AI is saying, hey, the best move to do is to double stack your pawns. I would have done exactly what black did. And this is, I think, the fascinating thing about these AIs is traditional chess teaching says, keep a good pawn structure, keep your knights in the middle of the board, and go from there. Here we're seeing it break it. Of course, maybe what it's thinking is it can release that rook, especially since the bishop seems to be a little bit caged in. So maybe it's making a little bit of an exception there. We look at the rating, and white has come down to 0.24. So that early lead that white had is slowly starting to come down, and black is starting to build some momentum. We do see that the king decides to castle. I don't see exactly why this is, a bad move. There were worse things to do, but again, the AI for white really wants to get that knight in the center and kind of cause a little bit of pressure onto black. I guess castling while your pawn structure has been disturbed is maybe not the best idea. We see black says, hey, anything you can do, I can do as well. And so they too decide to castle, even though the better move would have been to get the bishop off of its starting square. We then see that the AI still wants the knight to go to e5, control that center. Instead, we're seeing white deciding to get its rook off the starting square, get it into the action, maybe start pushing it forward. And you can see c4 is becoming a very hot and contested, spot on the board right now. The bishop finally does move, probably thinking, hey, okay, if this is going to be a contested area, we need to get our rooks into the game as well. White finally decides to do what white's been wanting to do, and I can now see why the AI was saying you need to do this, because by bringing your knight up like that, you would have prevented the bishop from starting, because if it comes up, you simply capture it. And some people see that the bishop is slightly more valuable than the knight, although in these timed games I would almost disagree. Maybe in the mid ratings, maybe in the later ratings, my theory goes out the window. But because the knight has got so many different places to move and it's not that easy to picture, it takes opponents a little bit more time to figure out, wait, where can this knight go? So every time you move the knight, you're going to prompt a slower response from your opponent. And when it's a timed game, that's going to add more pressure to them, and you might very well win on time. So I tend to favor the knights more than the bishops in timed matches, but generally your bishops are a bit stronger. So having that knight there, you are forcing this bishop to move, but if you had done it earlier, you would have prevented that from being able to have done in the first place. Of course, it is protected, but still, it could be a good trading of the pieces. Now we see something interesting, okay? It's a fair move. You're putting more defense. It already was defended, so I kind of see, okay, maybe, black's saying, hey, I like my knight here because I want to have pressure here on c4. Fair enough, getting that, which maybe we're going to see the knight take the bishop, and then it will take the rooks off their starting line. Well, they'll no longer be connected. AI wanted to bring the bishop back out of safety. Of course, that would have also disconnected the rooks. And what we can see is black is in a bit of a winning position. So maybe I shouldn't be criticizing black too much. But there we go. We see the attack. The piece has been captured. And just as we thought, black wants to keep their knight in that position to have pressure on c4, even though the AI is like the better move would have been to keep your rooks on the same file and rather capture back with the knight. Now we see white moving their knight, and again, not the best move. You're taking away a little bit of pressure on the c4. We are seeing black kind of setting things up, and it's interesting. The AI wants the little pawn to do a move, which I'm going to be honest with you, I don't see it right now. Maybe it's a better play for later on. because if you kind of move that pawn off, you're going to allow the knight, some area to jump into. But maybe, white's thinking of getting that knight back into that e5 square and putting pressure on the rook. Let's see what happens. Nope. We're seeing the rooks getting moved up, even though the AI for white also wants to move the pawns. So interesting, AI's like, hey guys, there are some pawns that you can move, but both players are focusing on the bigger pieces. Although black's now touching their pawns, but on the other side, again, the AI still wants the h5 pawn move. We now see the bishop retreating, where it might have been a little bit better, get a little bit of tempo if you'd put a chair on, b5, get some pressure on that rook. White decides to rather come in on a defensive play. And now what we're seeing is black continuing to push their pawn, even though it might be beneficial to bring their knight into play because, white has moved their knight out of the way. So, hey, they can take it back with either the pawn or the rook, get some pressure in there. What we see is white decides, they don't see this pawn in the a file as a threat. They're not blocking it by moving their pawn to a3. Instead, they're deciding to double up their rooks. And again, black mirroring, saying anything you can do, we can do better, even though, again, the AI is recommending a pawn move. We now see the king making their move, and hey, that is right on target for white. We then see black retreating their knight, even though the AI would have preferred them to be more aggressive. And this is interesting. The AI is wanting both players to be more aggressive, go out there, make the initiative. Of course, this is a semi-final, both players really want to win this. They want to get into the finals, and with time being a big factor, they're probably thinking, hey, let me maybe play the time game, keep that into factor, and be a little bit more defensive. But we do see white coming in with this interesting move, putting double pressure on both the knight and the pawn, even though the better move would have been just to stop the pawn's advance with a3. Now, that's interesting. Black decides to move their pawn there. Of course, it is protected by the bishop. Sorry, I didn't actually see that. I thought, why are we sacrificing? What am I missing? Why are we getting straight into sacrifices? And it's like, no, the black bishop is providing some support, even though the AI would have preferred, hey, get that knight back into that position. It's really, really strong there. What we're going to see is an interesting move by white, and the AI likes it as well, just kind of saying, hey, I don't want to take you, let's maybe lock you in, and the AI and white in perfect harmony over there. Black and their AI also in perfect harmony, and we're seeing this game starting to pick up. I mean, we've passed 20 moves, and this game is almost even. I mean, it is getting really, really close. I'm sure there's going to be a bit of action to come in now, because white being a little bit protective, the AI wants the king now to get in the action. Check at that. Wants the king to get in there to e2 and, kind of show how it's done, from the leadership style. But instead, white deciding to retreat the bishop. We then see black deciding to say, hey, I'm coming in for the attack. And yeah, there is this move to come check, but the knight is protecting it. So I don't see exactly what's happening. Black's AI is giving it the same advice that it's giving to white, saying, hey, it's time to get the king into action. We're entering the end game, even though we still have so many pieces on the board. Then we see an inaccuracy is made. In fact, no, this is more than inaccuracy. This is an orange question mark. The yellow one's inaccurate. The orange one is a mistake. So this is a mistake because what it means is that white is potentially going to lose material. The better thing to do would have been to push the pawn. And I guess putting that there, you're letting the king get a bit vulnerable. I don't know, maybe it's wanting to get more action there on that c4 square. What happens though is, unfortunately, black does miss the opportunity to win material. Now, what the AI wanted to do, and this is why I'm not as smart as the AI wanted to sacrifice the bishop by taking the pawn on g3. Now, what that would have done, I'm trying to look at it now. If you had taken it and then white recaptures, then... Oh, do you know why that's a cool move? Because if the bishop takes the pawn and then this pawn takes it back, it means there's no more pawn protecting this square over here, e3, which will allow for the bishop to come in, call check, and then take the rook. And yeah, you're getting a pawn and a rook for a bishop and a knight. Maybe it's not the best move, or maybe there's something else. I don't know. If you guys can see something else, but I'm thinking, yeah, you take that pawn, get that pawn off the square there, allows the knight to come in. Hey, you're going to have a little bit of fun kicking that king around. Anyway, it's not done. Black decides to retreat. And the reason why this is, it's a miss. So it's not like Black made a bad move, is they didn't take advantage of the mistake that White had made. And you can see we're back to center. So it was like, oh, a little bit of an imbalance. Black had an opportunity there, doesn't take it. It's kind of like in football, they're in front of goal and they just shoot. The keepers, you know, I don't know, out of the goals, they shoot and they miss where it could have been a nice goal. Anyway, White decides to put pressure on that knight instead of pushing their pawn forward. And we see that, okay, that strategy's kind of come out, and Black decides to retreat, which the AI is totally on board with. White eventually does push their pawn, even though the best move would have done to get the bishop on d3. We then see this knight getting moved around a lot, where again, the Black AI would have preferred the pawns to move. We do see the lining up of the bishop, and we're seeing the bishop on Black also coming in and trying to put some pressure on this knight over here. Because of course, if you move out the way, your rook is nice and exposed. Of course, you can maybe always push the pawn up, put a little bit of pressure on it, and that's not what is done. In fact, White does the better move, which is to get the king involved, to say, hey, okay, if you want to take, I'm going to take it back. I don't want to disrupt my my rooks that are now on the same, C file. Black decides, okay, I'm not interested in your knight then. Let's rather attack this pawn over here, which is not defended. I like that. It's a good move, solid choice. The better move would have been to get the knight back there, maybe bring it into play, because then you really are putting a lot of pressure on it. And then if you had done that, it would have been a lot more difficult to defend. So at the moment, this d4 pawn is not very well protected. Of course, the knight can always come out, the king can come in, but if you had done it with the knight, so keep the bishop there, and you bring the knight and you do it, come there and then come back, the king can't move up because the bishop would have checked it, and the knight could not have moved because then you're going to lose the rook. So we can see, yes, you've got a good idea, Black, coming in, attacking the d4 pawn, but rather do it with the knight, because that way would have been more difficult to defend. What we see is, yes, White sees that, says, okay, you're not going to get that pawn that easily. Pawn is pushed where instead the king should have been moved. Again, another pawn is pushed where the AI is like, okay, let's rather start eating pieces. I actually don't like that move recommended by the AI, and I'll tell you why. The reason I don't like it is because you would have then had a bit of an isolated pawn. But what we're seeing is that the AI doesn't care too much about, my schoolroom chess tactics. It has bigger things in mind. And yeah, the whole idea is to put pressure on that pawn. Black doesn't see it. And this is why it's a mistake, because it's now going to allow the pawn to be pushed and just start kicking that poor knight all over the place, which White doesn't see. And again, very important to note, we're past 30 moves into this game. Time is a factor. So White overlooks an opportunity to kick the knight. Instead, they decide to take the piece. So now this is White's turn, that they had a shot at winning the game. Well, not winning the game, but getting a nice advantage, and they do miss it. Black responds very aggressively by taking. White recaptures. Black captures, White captures, and I'm sure that pawn is now going to be captured. And it is seen as a great move. And I don't understand why it's a great move. I mean, it's a good move. It's the move I would have done. I don't know why it's highlighting it as great, because it's like more the obvious one. Again, if you're taken with the pawn, you would have had an isolated pawn, which you do not want. So maybe it was a great move because it was the only, decent move to be done. We then see the king kind of getting in on action, and you got to be a little bit careful here because, hey, knights now, you really want to be careful of a fork. Bringing the bishop back, you're just going to provide some support, and I'm sure black is now going to put a lot of attention in trying to get this black pawn into a queen now that we've entered, now that the rooks are out of the game. This is a missed opportunity. I don't see it that clearly. AI wants to push the pawn. Again, I don't see it that clearly, but AI sees this as a miss. We finally do see the bishop coming down. Again, it's saying it's a great move. That's why it's got the blue exclamation mark. But again, it's like also it's the only real way to defend that pawn is with that bishop. Then the knight saying, okay, I'm not interested. If you've got that defender, let's rather go hunting elsewhere. This pawn here, it is double stacked. It is, ripe for the taking. This pawn as well is a little bit isolated. So from this position, I'm really preferring black's position at the moment. And you can see with minus 0.33, it's not a huge advantage, but black's definitely in a bit of a winning position. Or no, the better position, just because looking at the pawns. White does decide to kind of, bring their knight out, saying, hey, if I get captured, at least my pawns are restructured. The better move would have been to bring the bishop out and kind of put pressure on the knight, because then you've got, this pawn in the background as well. Black probably sees that and says, hey, you know what, let me move this guy out of the way. It is a mistake. It's an unfortunate error. The AI would have preferred the capturing of that knight. Instead, what we're going to see happen is the bishop's going to come out now to put pressure on this pawn, which I think is not, it's just going to push it down. It's not like the hardest thing to defend. Also can be defended with the knight. Bringing the knight out here would have been a better way of doing it, because then, you then bring this here, and if it moves down, you can kind of capture it as long as you put a little bit of pressure on that knight, which you could have done with the bishop later on. So for me, that maybe it's a bit of an out of sequence move, but the AI definitely punishing white by saying, now you've really kind of given black the game. Like, it was balanced, but now huge advantage. I don't really see it. Like, what is black supposed to do? It's not coming obvious to me. Fair enough, I would have done that. Time pressure, AI saying that's a miss. There was only one good move. It wanted to, the black's AI really wants to eat that knight, sees it as a huge threat. But instead, that's seen as a miss, and again, the game is coming to balance. Like I say, I don't know, maybe should have analyzed this game a bit better, but it's just not obvious to me what should have been played there. Again, a huge, I'm confused now as well. What's happening? Yes, maybe the knight coming up here is putting some pressure and preventing that, capture from taking place. But hey, it seems like black's not interested, and this move's coming in here. Of course, the pawn's defending it from the king, and you're putting pressure on the knight. In fact, this bishop's basically dead because the king has to move in here, and then we're going to lose the bishop. So it comes in, although even what I was gonna do, white would have preferred. Why would that have been a better move? I guess that it's because if you had, no, I don't see it. I do not see it. And for the sake of keeping these videos not too long and letting you guys hear me think, we're just going to take it that's an inaccurate, even though I would have done the same move. Finally, that bishop takes it and is like, this is a great move, even though it's been wanting to do it all along. White retakes it. Black kind of comes in, and black's quite happy with how things are. And why not? You've kind of captured, well, not captured, you've kind of caged in this little bishop over here. The king decides to just move one square down. Fair enough, just allow the bishop some breathing room. And yeah, the king is now getting in on the action. We're seeing the pawns getting pushed up. I like this. If you're taking it, you're going to re-bring in your structure. So black, don't take it, be strong. No, black does take it instead of moving the king. And yeah, white has now restored its pawn position. Now, that's quite a fun move. That's quite cheeky. I like that. Put check on the king. You're going to capture this piece, isolate 2 pawns. In fact, I didn't even see that. We're moving a bit quickly, but that is brilliant. There's our fork. And wow, have we just not been paying attention to the balance of the game? But black is very much in a winning position here, and white finds themselves in trouble. So white comes in there, it's futile, they're going to start losing their pieces. King's putting on this pressure. Again, he's getting checked, coming in for the attack, and oh no. What does white do now? Their king is, went into a little bit of a rage, decided to go Leroy Jenkins on the knight, and totally out of position, can no longer protect that bishop that needs to stay in that place, because otherwise they're going to lose the pawn on a2, which is going to allow the black to get a queen. And you can see it. This is not good. This is not good for white. Keep in mind, time is still ticking, and these players are under the time pressure. I think next time I must get the times along with the moves, just to give more of an insight on, how the times were going, because that would have been great information to see. Yes, black decides to get their bishop out of the way. It does mean they lose that position. The king is kind of coming in, but this is not looking good. This is not looking good. And yeah, I'm happy to black saying, I'm happy, eat my knight, I'm going to get a queen. What happens? And this is not looking good. This is not looking good for white, but we are in a position where time is probably very, very stressed. So boom, another white pawn falls, and white's going to futilely try to maybe get their own pawn, but things are not looking good. All black needs to do is capture some pieces, get another queen in play, and you can even checkmate from here, but hey, you've got all these pawns. Just go get some more and just make sure it's not a stale. So we can see this. Oh, that is an interesting move. Let's actually have an action replay and look at the advantage bar here. Black decides to... they could have moved down and pinned the bishop. Pinned the bishop, allowed this pawn to come down here. The king would have prevented that pawn from getting in, but black sees that as a threat, takes it. Now, I don't know how much time was under pressure here, but white recaptures it, and suddenly black's still in a winning position, but it's not that, white technically cannot have a checkmate. If it was just the white king and the white bishop and the black king, white could not get a checkmate. But because there's still pawns on the board, there is a weird setup where maybe the king can be checkmated. So white still has a chance. But I think what's happening now is we're in the end game. Time is running out. And black's saying, hey, I'm happy to just attack with my pawns. And which is crazy, like not bringing the king in or getting the other ones involved. Okay, here we kind of see this happening. And we do just have a few moves left. So we are going to get our winner soon. And white's just very much saying, hey, I'm playing this here. And that's interesting. White doesn't take the pawn. That was a free pawn. You must know how much time pressure must be on these players for them to be passing up free material. Anyway, the black pawn gets pushed out of that position. King's coming in here, and though a check has been made, this is the part of the game where, unfortunately, black ran out of time, and the white pieces ending up winning, which is crazy. It's like, chess can be weird like that, where the one team is winning in the strong position, and then time is called, and white still a little bit of time on the clock. Like I said, we don't know exactly what the time intervals are between these, moves. But man, that was crazy. Thanks so much for watching, everyone. I will see you for an analysis of the final game. But really enjoyed this one, and thanks so much for watching. Cheers.